Hello and welcome to today's webinar on the Best Complete Streets Policies of 2014. I'm Stephanie Suskin, the Deputy Director of the National Complete Streets Coalition, a program at Smart Growth America. We have a great group of presenters today. First up will be Barbara McCann, Director of the Office of Safety, Energy, and Environment at the U.S. Department of Transportation. We'll also hear from Amanda Smith, Director of Planning and Development for the City of Ogdensburg, New York. Doug Halley, the Director of Health for the town of Acton, Massachusetts, and Catherine Greger, the Complete Streets Manager for the City of Austin, Texas. I encourage everyone listening to participate in the conversation. Type in your questions in the webinar screen or join in on Twitter with the hashtag #CompleteStreets. Here at the Coalition, we promote a comprehensive approach to Complete Streets policies and implementation. Our annual report celebrates those who have written and adopted policies that best reflect our ideal elements. A great, well-written policy doesn't guarantee real change, but it is evidence of a decision to use a new approach, one that prioritizes safety and access for all people, regardless of age, ability, income, race, ethnicity, or how they travel. So to kick us off, I'm going to hand it over to Barbara McCann with the U.S. Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks for the opportunity to give a little bit of a update on our Mayor's Challenge, which is a project of the U.S. DOT that converges pretty well with the Complete Streets movement and with the selection of places that have really great policies. So as most of you are probably aware, Secretary Anthony Fox has made bicycling and pedestrian safety one of his primary priorities in the safety arena. We have seen an increase in bicycle and pedestrian deaths, and they now make up about 17% of all traffic fatalities, and this is an unacceptable number. So we've launched a comprehensive approach. We are doing biking and walking assessments in every single state, and most recently we announced our Mayor's Challenge. The Mayor's Challenge is really about working with cities and other urban areas where bicycling and pedestrian deaths are the greatest to help them really ramp up their work around improving pedestrian and bicycle safety. And we felt at the federal level that the best way that we could help with that was to really help drive resources to those cities in the form of technical assistance and peer learning and some other pieces like that. And so we devised the Mayor's Challenge as a way to allow cities to really focus on this, talk to each other, get some recognition, and really move forward on bicycling and pedestrian safety, not just as a local issue, but as an issue of national priority. So right now we're in a phase where we are recruiting participants for the challenge, and we are asking folks to sign up and be part of it. What you see on your screen right now is a copy of our image of our webpage, which you can find at Mayor's Challenge at usdot.gov/mayorschallenge. And on that page you can see in the upper right there's a sign-up sheet for actually signing up for the challenge. And on the right side are the list of the challenge activities, which is what I'm going to talk about in a moment. In terms of signing up for the Mayor's Challenge, we have a whole year worth of activities planned, and so we're really looking at this as a fairly long-term initiative. The Mayor's Challenge is really based around the walking and biking statement that the department put out in 2010. It's officially the policy statement on pedestrian or bicycle and pedestrian accommodation regulations and recommendations. We don't use short little phrases like complete streets here in the federal government. We come up with very long names for things. But basically what it is, it's a direction to help local governments and state governments really take action on biking and walking, and it's a very good document. And so we built our challenges around the recommended actions in this document. The first recommended action is considering walking and bicycling as equals with other transportation modes. And you can move that slide forward. You could, thank you. Can you move it forward one more? Could you advance it one more, please? And So this is our number one challenge activity, and this is basically what Complete Streets is all about. It's about making a commitment to consider and take into account the needs of people on foot and bicycle in all transportation projects, both projects that are brand new road projects, rehab projects, and really thinking about it throughout the entire system, and thinking about it in the ways that the National Complete Streets Coalition has really put forth. So this is the first challenge area that in our 7 that we have for the challenge. Some of the other challenge areas are to identify and fix barriers for those walking or biking or people with all ages and abilities. This is part of the assessments that we're doing for in all of the states. The third challenge area is to collect data on biking and walking, both in terms of numbers of people doing it and people being hurt and injured across as they're using those modes. The fourth challenge area is to use designs that are appropriate to the street context, and we know there's lots and lots of work in that arena, which is fantastic. The next is to integrate improvements into maintenance projects and to be really thinking about doing this as a routine part of every day. So as you can tell, all of these really are about complete streets. The first one is about passing a policy. The next two are more on the side of helping promote safer behaviors. And so the next is to strengthen laws and ordinances around safe travel for people on foot and bike and for drivers and for that interaction. And then the final challenge area is to integrate education, engineering, and enforcement campaigns, which have really shown to be the way to do the best in improving safety. In terms of the Challenge 1, Complete Streets, we have the department has some resources, and we will also be referring people to the National Complete Streets Coalition resources and other organizations that have resources about how to really think about this issue differently, how to really elevate it as a primary priority at the city, county, or state level. And I think that the work that has been done by the coalition and by all of the presenters today really does represent the future. And we hope at the department to be able to really elevate that and help the organizations that are doing well to share their success and with some of the other cities and really learn from each other throughout the challenge year. So while we have a base set of resources that we're going to be offering during the challenge year, our expectation is that we will be working in partnership with organizations like the National Complete Streets Coalition and others to promote the products and techniques that they have that will help everyone improve pedestrian and bicycle safety. Will you advance the slide? So the Mayor's Challenge, right now we're recruiting folks to join, or cities to join, not folks. It has to be a jurisdiction. We're at about 35 cities all across the country. The actual challenge year begins on March 12th when we will have an event at our headquarters here in DC with the Secretary, with the experts from the various modes of the U.S. Department of Transportation. And it's not just Federal Highways Administration, it's also NHTSA, the Federal Transit Administration, Federal Motor Carriers Administration, and even the Federal Rail Administration are all involved in this challenge. And we'll have a day we'll spend with the participating cities, talk to them about doing their action plans and moving forward. And then at the end of the year, we will convene again to talk about what people achieved. Our expectation is not that every place will do every single challenge area. We expect many places will have already done challenge areas, like all of the cities we're going to hear about today will have already be able to check the box, at least on adopting a Complete Streets policy, and then we'll be, of course, moving forward on actually implementing a Complete Streets approach. So I think that's my summary. I really appreciate the time to be able to share this exciting initiative, and I'm really excited that the department is going to be able to work with all of the people all across the country who are using Complete Streets as a way to improve bicycle and walking safety, improve really safety for everyone, and all the other many benefits of the Complete Streets approach. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks so much, Barbara. I hope that each of you on today's webinar will take this challenge to your leaders and encourage them to participate. It's really exciting. But before we turn things over to our other speakers, I'm going to give you some information that you'll find in the report that came out today. At the end of 2014, over 710 jurisdictions have adopted a Complete Streets policy, and that includes 74 just this year. Most of the policies that have been adopted to date, about 45%, are resolutions, but many are legislation or jurisdictional policies that are adopted by its elected officials. And in 2014, we actually saw a higher number of those sorts of jurisdictional policies adopted by an elected board than we have in previous years. Since I've read all of these, I can tell you that these policies tend to be a bit more comprehensive and cover more elements and also sort of represent more of the top policies every year. Most of the policies adopted to date have been adopted in smaller suburban communities. But that's not to say that they're not adopted in rural areas or small towns or big cities. They certainly are, and you can see about 1 in 5 are those small towns or rural communities. And in 2014, pretty much in line with general trends in terms of where these policies are being adopted at the municipal level. Really exciting for me is that policies have been getting better every year. The median score of policies adopted in 2014 was 62, and of the best 51 policies adopted of all time, 1/3 were adopted in 2014. And jurisdictions are paying attention to what needs to happen after a policy is adopted more and more. Of the policies that were adopted last year, 71% named at least one implementation activity, and 45% included at least 2 implementation steps that are recommended by the National Complete Streets Coalition. On top of that, 37% of all policies identified a specific person or committee to oversee that implementation or otherwise required regular public reporting on implementation progress. So I'm pleased to share now our top scoring policies from 2014. Number 1 is Ogdensburg, New York with a score of 92.8. Number 2 is Troy, New York. And tied for 3rd, we have a really tight race this year, Lakemore, Illinois, Dawson County, Montana, and Austin, Texas. And then tied for 6th, we had 4 communities in Massachusetts, Acton, Middleton, Reading, and Salem. And then tied for 10th, we had the Los Angeles County Metro, which is the transit agency and MPO for Los Angeles County. And also tied with them is Stoughton, Massachusetts. And with that, I'll introduce our next speaker, Amanda Smith, who is the Director of Planning and Development for that community that adopted the number 1 policy, Ogdensburg. So Amanda, over to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. On behalf of Ogdensburg, I'm honored and admittedly a little bit surprised by today's announcement. Next slide. Ogdensburg is a small city with approximately 11,000 year-round residents on the southern banks of the St. Lawrence River in northern New York State. Ogdensburg is part of the Thousand Islands area, which is a popular summer destination just minutes south of Ottawa, Ontario, and roughly 2 hours north of Syracuse, New York. Next slide. Generally speaking, Ogdensburg is an aging community, which is one of the factors that led to the development of the city's Complete Streets initiative. In addition to the growing number of active seniors, Ogdensburg is embarking on a total renaissance movement aimed at remediating and redeveloping nearly 5 miles of former industrial waterfront. Through public visioning exercises, it became evident that the community desired more pedestrian connectivity, not only with the city's waterfront, but throughout the community. Next slide. To support the initiative to incorporate complete streets within the community, Ogdensburg partnered with the St. Lawrence Health Initiative, who provided startup funding and technical assistance to the city, and the City Council established an active living task force. The task force is composed of 7 volunteer members that hold 3-year terms that are appointed by the City Council and the Mayor. The composition of the task force was critical. We knew initially that we needed strong members that were capable of advocating for the movement, and we wanted members that represented the diverse user groups of Complete Streets. In the end, we were successful in that the task force members range in age, ability, and interest, representing bikers, runners, walkers, families, as well as the elderly. And we had strong leadership from a local not-for-profit, CGSW Racing, a group that at the time was just formulating. CGSW is now a 501c3 that supports active living and hosts annual events, including a duathlon series and a triathlon here in Ogdensburg. In terms of technical assistance, the Health Initiative provided training opportunities for the task force members and for city staff. The task force members and staff participated in 2 workshops so far and will participate in a 3rd workshop this spring. The first of these workshops was an introduction to Complete Streets, policy and planning options, and a workshop in which participants completed a Complete Streets assessment. The assessment was conducted on the streets here in Ogdensburg and helps participants better understand the current conditions in our community. The second workshop examined the power of 10 and making community connections using Complete Streets techniques. The third workshop that will be held in March is aimed at planning for Complete Streets and will focus on the next steps for communities, helping them draft a Complete Streets plan. With this training, the task force worked with the city staff from the planning department as well as Parks and Recreation Department and the director of DPW to complete and implement our Complete Streets policy. The policy is included in Article 3 of Chapter 189 of the Ogdensburg Municipal Code under Streets and Sidewalks. And a little excerpt is shown here on the slide. Next slide. The funding from the Health Initiative also enabled our community to implement key Complete Streets principles within the city's up-and-coming Marina District. This first project included the implementation of sidewalks, crosswalks, and pedestrian signage in an area that was experiencing increased pedestrian traffic as a result of other public and private investments, but lacked pedestrian infrastructure. This is also the area in which the local duathlon series takes place, June through August, that the city is actively engaged in providing better infrastructure for. Next slide. While this first project was small, it has set the stage for the next phase of Complete Streets here in Ogdensburg. The task force is not only charged with annual reporting on the city's progress, but is responsible for promoting health through physical activity and active transportation for all user groups. Next slide. Through the city's ongoing redevelopment and planning efforts, concepts for some key projects have been completed, such as this overlay of State Street illustrating Complete Streets principles at work. Next slide. Or this concept for defining street hierarchies shown by these cross sections here. Next slide. The task force has also mapped a citywide bike route that will be part of a comprehensive bike and pedestrian plan, which will enable the city to prioritize Complete Streets projects and identify and dedicate funding towards implementation. Crafting the bike and pedestrian plan is our next milestone. With the completion of this plan and our Complete Streets policy already in place, Our community will be better positioned to identify key partners and seek funding that is essential to complement the city's sparse resources to fully realize the Complete Streets vision here in Ogdensburg. Next slide. So that really concludes my presentation. I did just want to read this one quote taken out of our policy, which is, "The City of Ogdensburg shall view complete streets as integral to everyday transportation, decision-making practices, and processes." And I think that that's very relevant given what Barbara stated earlier in her introduction to Complete Streets. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Doug Halley, the Director of Board of Health for the town of Acton, Massachusetts.
Thank you, Andrea, and congratulations on being named the top policy for 2014. I'd also like to thank Smart Growth America and the National Complete Streets Coalition for their important work in promoting complete streets. We're very pleased to be among the top 10 of recognized complete street plans. Next slide. Acton is a suburban town in Middlesex County, Massachusetts, about 21 miles west-northwest of Boston, just west of Concord along Route 2. The first casualty of the Revolutionary War was from Acton. Historically, it is a farming community that has transitioned to a bedroom community, with many residents moving here for its excellent education system and accessibility to jobs in Boston. In the past 10 years, Acton has grown more culturally diverse, with our Asian population increasing from 3% to 20%. It also has become more economically diverse in our attempts to meet state requirements for having 10% affordable housing. Next slide, please. The Health Department received a grant in 2010 from the Community Health Network Area 15 to survey what residents felt were pressing health issues. Transportation came up on top, which is not what we were exactly expecting, but because of that, we started to look into what transportation meant to health issues. In response to that survey, we got an additional grant in 2012 to develop a regional plan for making sidewalks and trails more handicapped accessible and making it easier for people to utilize those sidewalks and trails. Also in 2012, we heard for the first time about complete street policies as the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission held a workshop targeted at health professionals, and the concept seemed very intriguing to us at that point. In January of 2014, while I was giving a presentation at an Accessible Transportation Forum, Chris Kushel of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission volunteered to assist Acton in developing a complete street policy, and I agreed wholeheartedly. Next slide, please. The Health Department was not alone in its interest in developing a complete street policy. During the 2020 planning process, which was developing a strategic plan for the town, transportation was also identified as an issue to address. The Board of Selectmen, using the 2020 plan as guidance, identified a complete street policy as one of their long-term goals. More and more of the population was interested in improving connections, making travel more safe and pleasant, reducing congestion, and also to try to support economic growth and community stability. Next slide, please. Given the characteristics of the community with a large commuting base and a road base developed before the advent of automobiles, we identified many opportunities that the policy could address. Encouraging healthy options like walking, running, or biking while making those options safe within the road system. Promoting public transportation and carpooling to reduce costs, improve air quality, and make better connections. And finally, to position Acton to better access state funds that will be targeted towards communities building complete streets. Next slide. While the town was very supportive of complete streets, we felt it was important to have an inclusive process that brought all the transportation, planning, health groups together to provide them with an opportunity to have their concerns addressed within the policy. Chris Kushel was instrumental in developing a draft and revising the plan to meet the expectations of everyone participating. In the process of developing the complete street policy, we looked at our neighbors, Littleton and Maynard, who created complete street policies in the last year, and we utilized them as our base to create our policy. The final Complete Street policy was then brought to each board and committee for a public endorsement, and finally to the Board of Selectmen, who adopted the policy unanimously. This allowed us to get as much information as we could out to the public so that they could follow the progress of the Complete Street policy and also have some buy-in to its conditions. Next slide. Two highlights of our policy I would point to would be the core commitment and evaluation process. The policy is all-inclusive both for the modes of transportation and the capabilities of all users. To ensure that this is just not another policy that collects dust and goes unused, we put in a requirement for periodic assessment and to rate the success and effectiveness of implementing the policy. Next slide, please. Our next step is to work with the DPW Director, Transportation Advisory Committee, and the Sidewalk Committee in prioritizing streets for their compatibility with complete street features. We have initially targeted a street scheduled for rehabilitation in 2016 to undergo a complete street design review. Lastly, we are working on a regional basis to develop suburban public transportation to meet the needs of our commuters, reverse commuters, seniors, people with disabilities, and special populations, in particular our rapidly expanding non-English speakers and our 12 to 16-year-old population. Through that, we've created an organization called Crosstown Connect, which has 5 private and 5 public partners that provide transportation for the people that have transportation needs. Next slide, please. This is my contact information if anyone would like to know more about our program. Now I'll turn it over to Catherine Greger, Complete Streets Program Manager for the Austin Transportation Department, Austin, Texas. Thank you.
Hi, this is Catherine, and I would love anyone that wishes to contact me by email afterward for any of this information. Next slide. So we basically have 10 things that helped us build on our strong bicycle program that had been around in Austin for over 10 years. And our Complete Streets policy is actually our second one, and it really builds on all of our experience with bicycle infrastructure. So first of all, we had terrible traffic here, which helps people take biking and walking and transit seriously as a mode of transportation. Next slide. So our bicycle program was actually based at the Public Works Department, which allowed us to integrate investments in bicycle infrastructure with our capital improvement project dollars. And the Public Works Department was able to fund a full group of staff with designers, planners, project managers, and community outreach staff. And we think that's very important too. Next slide. So they were able to add bicycle lanes during road work. And in 2002, our City Council passed what we refer to as our first Complete Streets resolution, which was a 20% set aside for bicycle and pedestrian facilities in all major road projects. And as our
So this is Stephanie. It sounds like we've lost Catherine, which is why you all don't hear her anymore. We are working on the issue, and hopefully she'll be able to join us and be able to complete her presentation and tell you all about the great work that's happening in Austin. While we wait for her, how about we answer a couple of the questions that have come in. 2 of them that are in the question box right now are for Barbara McCann at DOT. The first is if there will be a list of the mayors and cities that have signed up for the challenge online.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Yes, we will. In fact, we're going to issue a press release in the next few days with this first set, the first group of cities that signed up. And as I said, we're at about 35, and that's growing every single day. This afternoon, if you want to get a little bit of a sneak peek, we are doing a webinar at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. You can find the link on our webpage. So if you want to spend your entire day in webinars, you're welcome to join us again. And we're going to share a map that gives you a little hint about where some of those places are. Then after we do that initial news release, every couple of weeks we will, at regular intervals, we will be posting the rest of the cities that are joining. So yes, you will have that information. And if you have a burning desire to know a particular place, you can email us at our email address there that you'll find on the web page and ask about a particular place. I really hope and look forward to having some of the cities speaking today sign up, because we have a number of cities who are signing up because they want to share their good progress with other cities, as well as places that want to ramp up their own work. They also want to share their work. So both types of cities are welcome and will be a big part of the challenge.
Hi, this is Catherine. I am back on the call. I don't know what happened there.
Okay, great. Well, we'll hop right back into your presentation then.
Let's see, where did we lose each other? Could you hear me during point 3, add bike lanes during road work?
You began that point and dropped off sort of in the middle.
Okay, so I think what I was saying was that our first Complete Streets policy was actually our 2002 City Council resolution, and that was a 20% set aside for bicycle and pedestrian improvements in all major roadwork projects. And as our Public Works Director, Howard Lazarus, put it, whenever you can, add bicycle facilities during road work. Otherwise, you lose that opportunity, perhaps for a generation. And of course, when you're resurfacing a project anyway, doing the striping for bike lanes is basically the cost of paint. Next slide. This is an example of one of our new projects that got put in the University of Texas area. Next slide. So while we were building our resources within the city internally, we also actively encouraged community advocates. The Street Smart Task Force was created, founded by our former mayor, Will Wynn, and with then local hero, Lance Armstrong, at the table. We got a very gung-ho cycling community engaged that's now known as Bike Austin, a wonderful nonprofit. Formed a bicycle advisory group, and we now also have a pedestrian advisory council. And a separate nonprofit was formed in the community to do the fundraising to bring bike share to Austin, and we now have a robust program with B-Cycle. Next slide. We really encourage using a bicycle master plan as an organizing and communication tool. Austin did its first one in 1998. Did an update in 2009, and this fall we just released a very ambitious new bike plan. It's online, and I really encourage you all to look at it. It identifies about $150 million in funding needs and projects, and really emphasizes separated bicycle facilities for greater safety. Next slide. We also really encourage cities to build a lot of bicycle routes fast. We found that there's something about getting to a critical mass where people physically see a lot of bike lanes and facilities on the ground, that they start to see that the shape of the city is changing. They see cyclists out using them, and they start to think differently about their own transportation choices. Next slide. We also would really encourage other cities to adopt the NACTO guides. The National Association of City Transportation Officials has done some wonderful work putting these design guides out. And we found that these kind of became our Bibles in a sense and gave us a common language to communicate across departments and between the city, the private sector, and the community. And these are online. They have great websites as well. Next slide. So basically what has occurred in Austin over the past 10, 12 years is that we've really shifted city culture so that planning for bicycles and the pedestrian has become business as usual. The photo you see there on the top left is our wonderful Fluker bicycle and pedestrian bridge that crosses our river that runs through our downtown. On the right, you see a cross-departmental group of city leaders and community leaders celebrating at a ribbon-cutting ceremony together. And it's really been exciting to see this, and it's also given us this tremendous foundation for passing our new Complete Streets policy and the work that lies ahead. Next slide. We were also fortunate enough to participate in the Green Lane Project. We were one of 6 cities in the 2-year period that we did it. And amongst the support services that they provided to our city was to send our decision makers on study tours to Holland and Denmark. Their philosophy is if they can see it and write it, they'll believe it, and that was really true for us. We had our public works director, our city manager, city council member, city traffic engineer, and so on and so forth, all able to participate. Next slide. Mark Ott, our city manager, went on the tour, and his big takeaway was the idea that you could make an investment where one of the return on investments was joy. He rediscovered the joy of riding a bicycle. Next slide. Our Public Works Director, Howard Lazarus, the light bulb that went off for him was the idea that cities need to serve not just cyclists, not the Lycra crowd, but rather people on bikes. Next slide. And our council member, Chris Riley, has been a huge spearhead behind all of this at the City of Austin. Doesn't own a car himself, huge cyclist. But his big insight from going to Europe was that it takes decades to build mature bicycle networks. So you want to make incremental improvements and retrofits every year. And what they were able to see in a city like Amsterdam is that this didn't happen overnight. These countries and cities very consciously set out on this path 40 years ago, and that's why they have a 30 to 50% mode share for bicycling today. Next slide. So finally, we were at the point where we were ready to pass kind of a next generation Complete Streets policy and activate it. And it was actually the National Complete Streets Coalition coming to town during a workshop that was funded by the AARP that kicked this all off last December. Next slide. And what we think is kind of unique about our policy and that we would encourage others to consider is it has all the usual mobility elements, but in addition it has a big emphasis on urban design and on green streets. And these were things that we had identified in our recent comprehensive planning process as important for Austin, but they also get back to the whole fact that land use and transportation must be approached as one complex interrelated challenge. Next slide. So last year was a very busy year. We kicked off policy development in January. We formed a Complete Streets Steering Committee with leadership across city departments. We aligned it with our recent Imagine Austin comprehensive plan and got everybody's buy-in as part of comp plan implementation. And by June, we had the Complete Streets policy adopted. And in September, the National Complete Streets Coalition sent us a couple of wonderful consultants, Beth Rigner and Paul Zykowski, who did a couple of days of intensive workshop and training with us, which really helped us take the policy to the next level. We did staff training, community education, and began the development of an implementation work plan, and it's just a lot of specific things that needed to be addressed in Austin. That has led us to the development of a 5-year plan using a phased approach. And we've done a great body of research into what our peer cities, which would more be large cities, Austin has a metro area now approaching 2 million, but also mid-sized cities that started some years before us with a Complete Streets kind of name to their process. And we've really learned a lot from them, and we'd love to share that information. Coincidentally, our bike plan and our urban trails master plan, which had both been moving forward, also got adopted last November. So it was really a time of great synergy for Austin. And over there on the right, you see a project that got completed last year in our University of Texas area. Next slide. So here's the 5-year process that we are envisioning now based on what we have seen other cities have done in terms of how you kind of spread this out, how you plan for funding horizons, what you do first, what you do second. We have a lot of focus on our right-of-way standards and continuing to refine complete streets and right-of-way guidelines, but also doing the education, the active implementation. And within 5 years, we want to have a lot of great projects on the ground and keep doing that monitoring and metrics. So Stephanie, thanks again to you and the Complete Streets Coalition, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was a great presentation. And thank you also to Doug, Andrea, and Barbara. Right now, I'm excited to share a few upcoming resources that will help implement these great policies. So first up, next month, Smart Growth America and the National Complete Streets Coalition will release a new report called Safer Streets, Stronger Economies, which looks at the transportation and economic conditions of complete streets projects before and after they are completed. We'll share examples from across the country about person trips, safety, cost, and impacts in jobs and wages. So be sure to join our mailing list and get that report as soon as it's released. Following that, we are releasing a tool for transportation professionals to help them better communicate how a Complete Streets project helps achieve those local goals and needs by collecting specific information before, during, and after a project is completed. And specifically, we're looking at measures of access, economy, environment, place, safety, health, and equity. And we also have a comprehensive and continually updated hub of implementation tips, examples, and resources for each of the 5 activities needed for successful Complete Streets implementation. And that's at completestreets.org/implementation. And now I think we have some time to go open the floor for some questions. You can type your questions in the webinar screen or ask them on Twitter with the hashtag CompleteStreets. I'll ask the first question to kick us off, and this is for everyone on the panel. The policies that were adopted in your cities are definitely models for the rest of the country to follow. Do you have specific advice that you would give to other cities as they draft policies of their own?
This is Andrea from Ogdensburg, and I think for us, which seems like a common theme for the 3 communities that spoke today, but definitely getting public feedback from the beginning and using for us what was the Active Living Task Force, getting that established early on and getting their feedback, getting them to participate in the training and the workshops was a critical component for us as a small community. This adopting Complete Streets and getting the community to really understand what they are and want them for our community was a big achievement, a big change. So getting other people other than city staff out there advocating for it was critical to getting council and the local officials on board with the change. So I think for us, the public outreach component and having that advisory committee was instrumental in developing the policy and bringing feedback in terms of what were the things they wanted to see as users, as bikers, as runners, as walkers. So that was very, very helpful for us.
And this is Catherine, and I think my suggestion would be to really engage your public works department and do extensive internal training. Often this is a big change for folks that have been in their jobs for a long time, and you can't just assume that they get it and are as excited about it as you are. We've put a lot of time into bringing our staff along, and particularly public works. They can really make you or break you on this.
I would agree with that completely, and it's not just in terms of constructing elements of complete streets, it's also in maintaining them, especially when you live up here when it snows all the time. Many sidewalks and bikeways don't get plowed into the very end, and trying to get that to be more prioritized is very, very difficult.
Great. Well, thanks for those great answers. We have a ton of questions in there. I'm going to combine two here. How do you engage partners among different city departments and with your regional metropolitan planning organization or other planning agency? Specifically, I think there are also questions about engaging the health department and how to create those bridges between health and engineering.
I'll speak a little bit to that. I was very fortunate that in early part of my career I worked in engineering and I transitioned to health department, and I had a pretty good understanding of what makes them tick. And so I agree that reaching out to them and having them understand what our goals are and what their goals are is very critical in moving Complete Street project ahead.
Yeah, we have actually done formal classes, cross-departmental training. We call it Compact and Connected, and we have been doing this for a couple years now, and we bring 50 staff from across departments together to talk about all the underlying principles of all this. And that's been really effective in building understanding across departments and in a sense of collaboration for this work.
Yeah, this is Barbara. I would add in there that one of the reasons that all this collaboration is so important is that so much of creating complete streets is in the details. It's in getting the intersections between the different parts of our cities to work better together. The street service with the sidewalk with the building, the intersections, all of those pieces. There's different people and different agencies engaged in all those places, and so this kind of partnership that all of the presenters are talking about, I think is really critical to having a successful policy.
Yes, and our Health and Human Services Department actually went after and obtained a federal grant for 3 years, and they used those funds to staff 2 positions in our planning department that worked full-time on improving public health through planning and transportation aspects of the city, including rewriting our subdivision code.
Great answers. And here's a question for Ogdensburg and Acton. What are the best strategies for smaller communities with fewer resources and perhaps only a volunteer committee to help make things happen?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Doug.
When you're in a smaller community, you really have to have a good outreach program to the people in the community. And it's a two-way street. You have to have a better understanding of what they are looking for and what you can put in place. In Acton, we rely a lot upon volunteers. We probably have 100 different committees that look at a variety of different issues. So there's a lot of volunteer time spent in doing a lot of this work. You have to really connect with those volunteers. You have to present the program so it seems like it's something that's worthwhile to spend their time on, because time is a very critical element for them.
And I would echo Doug's comments. Very much the same here. We heavily rely on volunteer boards for much of what the city does, everything from complete streets to planning and zoning boards to rec commissions. Again, I mean, and I think that Doug's also right that it's about making sure those committees as volunteers recognize that their feedback, their input is valuable, it's being heard and listened to. showing that you can follow up with action is always great. Sometimes a challenge, but I think showing progress on the things that they've been instrumental in formulating as projects or priorities helps them stay engaged, and keeping them engaged is always a challenge because, again, to Doug's point, time is valuable, and that's what they're giving to you. So that it's a two-edged sword, I guess, in that it's always challenging because you want them to feel valued. With limited resources, getting things implemented can be hard and can take time. But I think that's really our strategy is utilizing volunteers to our greatest extent possible, and they're the people that are in the communities using the complete streets, using the sidewalks, wanting the bike lanes. So it's great to have them engaged, telling you where you need it and how it could be better. So.
Great. And here's a question that I get asked a lot, so it'd be great for any of the panelists here to give advice. Just as a regular citizen, someone who's not necessarily involved in any sort of organized advocacy structure, what is the best thing that I could do to encourage my city to adopt and implement complete streets? How do I start?
Well, I have an easy answer for that. You should join the Mayor's Challenge and work with, get to know some other cities. As this fantastic webinar has helped, has already demonstrated that the peer learning is amazing, and that's something that we're really going to be working through with the challenge with the Department of Transportation. And secondly, I think it's the beginning of a conversation, and I'll let some of the others chime in.
This is Andrea again from Ogdensburg, and I would say that talk to your legislators, talk to your city managers or your administration, whether it's the town council or selectmen, and express your interest there. Typically from there it would get transferred on to staff, I would assume. That's not unlike how it started here. It was probably a little bit more of the reverse of that, but definitely talk to your local officials and express your interest to them. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Often we are getting too little guidance from too few people. In a community like Acton with 20,000 people, our town meetings, most people are about 500 that show up. Every individual voice is worth something, and if you really care about moving a project ahead, if you speak and talk about it, more and more people will hear it and more people will join it.
Yes, and this is Catherine. I would put together a small coalition, either bike shops in your community. Who else might have an interest in seeing this move forward? If you just get 5 or 6 people together and you have a name, then you can go around and make the rounds of mayor and council and advocate as a community group, and that instantly amplifies your voice from being one person to a movement.
Great answers. I will answer one more question before I sort of wrap things up for the hour. A lot of questions have come in about state DOTs and whether they have policies and what they're doing. And I'm happy to say that we have 30 state DOTs plus the District of Columbia and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico that have adopted some form of a complete streets policy. Some are stronger than others, and you can see those rankings in our report. State DOTs have a lot of challenges and competing priorities and interests, but a number of them are stepping up and really figuring out how to deliver great multimodal solutions that are appropriate for community context. Some resources that I think are really helpful include the Innovative DOT, which is a publication that Smart Growth America and the State Smart Transportation Initiative put together every, they update it about every year, and the most recent version just came out a few weeks ago, and that's a great place to start as a DOT in making these changes. Related, we also just put out the innovative MPO at Transportation for America, which talks about the ways that the regional planning organizations that distribute federal money can help move us into the 21st century with Complete Streets implementation. And with that, I want to thank everyone again for all of their knowledge that they shared with us and their wonderful answers to these off-the-cuff questions that just came in. The webinar will be recorded and posted on our webpage for everyone who's been asking about that. You'll be able to listen in and hear me awkwardly end this as many times as you'd like. So with that recording and with the report that came out today, as well as our local Complete Streets policy workbook, I think all of you are well positioned to score big in next year's report. And if you've already committed to Complete Streets, be sure to look for those new reports that I've talked about, the Safer Streets, Stronger Economies report, especially next month. And check out all the resources we have on our website about implementation. Again, please be sure to sign up for our Secretary Fox's Mayor's Challenge too. It's a great way to connect with peers pursuing safer streets and implementing Complete Streets. And once again, many thanks to our panelists and to every community that has committed to Complete Streets to date.